Governor, you now have Juliet Papa from 1010 Wins. Juliet, your line is now open. Please unmute your microphone.
Hello, Miss Papa.
Hi, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Is this a commercial for Verizon? Go ahead.
Yes, Happy New Year. Thank you.
Happy New Year, Juliet.
Well, since rewriting your speech, let's talk about that a little bit. What do you want to do with the stimulus money that you believe you'll get, or at least the money to cover your debt?
Two things. One, we have a lot of pain that has to be compensated in New York State. We have tenants who can't pay back rent. We have landlords who can't pay their mortgages. We have bills, governmental bills, which is what the $15 billion in state funding is about. We have small businesses that need loans to reopen because they've been devastated. We have restaurants that need to be refinanced. And then we need to build for the future. And we have to take this moment to actually anticipate the post-COVID world and build for the post-COVID world. Because the post-COVID world is going to be different. We know that. And it's going to be a different economy. And the place that does the best is the place that anticipates those changes. But my case to Washington now is going to be very simple. Pure fairness. You took $30 billion from us and abused us and victimized us. And we are an economic engine for the nation. So we need $15 billion, which is our deficit, to get through this year. If we were forced, Julia, to do it on our own, which is what I was afraid of, it would have required sacrifices from everywhere and everyone, and it would have done damage for a long period of time. New York City is under true stress on many levels, right? And you hear it from people all day long. I know I hear it from people all day long. So this was not the time to make a bad situation worse. And the Senate, not out of politics, but just out of justice and fairness, they know what to us was wrong. Next question, operator.
Governor, you now have Marcia Kramer from CBS 2. Marcia, your line is now open. Please unmute your microphone.
Happy New Year, Governor. How you doing?
I am happy today. Since Happy New Year, Marcia, it is the first day that I am happy. So Happy New Year.
I am happy that you're happy.
I bet you are happy that I am happy, because when I am not happy, then I tend to share the unhappiness with people such as yourself.
Well, you know, there's probably a quote from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin would have something about happiness.
Oh, yes, there is a quote from Teilhard de Chardin. If I am not happy, then you will not be happy. That's Teilhard de Chardin, as translated by A.J. Parkinson.
I was just going to say it sounded more like A.J. Parkinson.
Yeah.
So, Governor, I actually have some real questions. So there are reports that you are going to include in your State of the State asking the state to approve sports betting and legalizing marijuana. I wondered if you could talk to me about both of them and why you think that's important in terms of revenue streams for this year.
Yes. Look, we're going to turn to Washington for compensation from as crime victims, as I call it, with a slight rhetorical flourish. But we're also going to do our part to raise revenue. And two places where we can raise revenue, one is sports betting, and I'm going to ask Rob to explain how we want to do sports betting. We want to do sports betting the way the state runs the lottery, Marcia, where the state gets the revenues. Many states have done sports betting, but they basically allow casinos to run their own gambling operations. That makes a lot of money for casinos, but it makes minimal money for the state. And I'm not here to make casinos a lot of money. I'm here to raise funds for the state. So we have a different model for sports betting. And then recreational marijuana, I think this should have been passed years ago. I think too many people have been imprisoned and incarcerated and punished. Too many of those people are Black, Latino, and poor. It's exaggerated the injustice of the justice system. So I've supported it for years. I've tried to pass it. But this is a year where we do need the funding, and a lot of New Yorkers are struggling. So I think this year will give us the momentum to get it over the goal line. Rob, do you want to speak about sports betting, though? Because there's a very big difference in the way we intend to do it.
So the narrative out there has been that the state is losing billions of dollars to other states to sports betting. But the reality is that the billions of dollars that are being wagered and the monies that are being made are not being made by the taxing jurisdictions. In New Jersey, for example, which is the most commonly used example, in the entire 3 years of sports betting, they've collected less than $80 million, actually only $45 million in 12 months, compared to the billions that are being talked about. The reason being, everyone else is making a lot of money off sports betting. The jurisdiction where it's in the state is not. There are a few states that have done it a different way, where the state is contracts with the private sector who runs the sports books, but the state ends up getting the majority of what is left over after everything is returned to the bettors. So the difference between the two estimates would be between the state making somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 million a year versus $500 million a year. So the way the governor is proposing it, and we'll advance it, is so that the state can get up to $500 million a year instead of 50, and that money would then go to the state budget. Otherwise, for the bettors, it's seamless and it's exactly the same. The only difference is state gets the money versus others. And that's the proposal, which you'll see when the governor puts out his executive budget.
Rob, how much do we think we would raise from marijuana?
Marijuana has a longer just runway by the time you set it up, but by the time it's fully effective, under our proposal, you'll get about $300 million a year, but again, that will take several years to get up to those numbers.
And again, marijuana, as everyone knows, Massachusetts has legalized marijuana, New Jersey is going to legalize marijuana, so what are we really talking about at this point? Next question, operator.
Governor, you now have Jacqueline Slater from WNYT. Jacqueline, your line is now open. Please unmute your microphone.
Yeah, hi, Governor. Just wondering, a week and a half ago, you had talked about a vaccination campaign, educational campaign. So we're kind of wondering, where does that stand right now? What's been done? What can we expect as far as making sure that everybody's getting on board with this?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Look, we have to get to 70 to 90% to hit critical immunity, right? Herd immunity. 70 to 90 is a very high percentage. This is not the COVID nasal test. This is a vaccine. It's a needle. People are nervous about vaccines. There was skepticism about the way this vaccine was developed. There was skepticism about the Trump administration. There was skepticism about an accelerated approval process. There's skepticism among the Black community for good reason, with what happened in Tuskegee, et cetera. So getting to 70 and 90% is very, very difficult. That's why with the healthcare community, which is where we're starting, we want to make sure we get closer to 90% because that is a community that is informed and understands how important this is. And they're also setting an example. We will have an aggressive education campaign for the public about the vaccine timed for when it will be open to the public. We're not yet open to the public, right? We're doing healthcare workers, and then 1B will go into essential workers and 75 plus. And that's when we'll start the public education campaign. When will we start a large-scale public availability? We have the distribution mechanism ready. We just need the supply. Again, we're getting 300,000 per week. We have 2 million healthcare workers in this state, 2.1 million, including nursing home residents and staff. We still don't even have enough for the 2.1 million. We're only at 900,000 of the 2.1 million, so we're not even halfway in supply through the healthcare workers. And with the healthcare workers, we haven't hit the point where healthcare workers, the point of refusal, we call it. In other words, let's say 85% of the healthcare workers take the vaccine. Let's say 15% don't. Okay, when a hospital gets to 85% and says, I offered it to everyone, this 15% doesn't want to take it, fine. Then we'll take that allocation, we'll move it on. But we're not there yet. We don't have enough to do the healthcare workers. We haven't reached healthcare worker refusal levels. And when we do get the supply to open to the general public, then we'll start the public education campaign. But it's going to be an effort to get to 70 to 90. I'll tell you that. And we have to do much better than 70 with the healthcare community. Otherwise, forget herd immunity. What's less than herd immunity? Single cow immunity? What would they do? Next question, operator.
Governor, you now have Juan Manuel Benitez from New York 1. Juan, your line is now open. Please unmute your microphone.
Good afternoon, Mr. Governor. How are you?
How are you? Good to hear your voice.
Very, very good. Thank you. You're asking the federal government to impose more travel controls in order to fight the new UK COVID-19 variant. But that highly contagious variant is already present in New York State. What additional protective measures are you implementing? And what other information do you have about that Saratoga case that you're saying now is connected to travel? Are there more New Yorkers infected with this variant? What are the findings of your test and trace program?
Okay. The UK variant was first detected in the UK, hence the UK variant. We in New York did the first ban requiring testing of anyone who came from the UK. I did that with the airlines. I asked the federal government to do it. Days later, the federal government required testing. Obviously, days are relevant here because you have tens of thousands of people coming every day. It only takes one. So the UK variant got here because I believe the country was slow. We then do more testing than any state in the nation. And we do more testing for this UK variant. The UK variant test is a very complicated test. It takes the CDC 2 weeks to run one specimen for the UK variant. Our state laboratory, it takes 40 hours to run that test, the UK variant test. We've run about 5,000 UK variant tests. We found one case in Saratoga Springs, Saratoga County. That case, Dr. Zucker can speak about this and respect the HIPAA laws. They then contact trace off that case. The case was an employee in a jewelry store in Saratoga Springs. In the contact tracing, it appears that that person was in contact with a person who traveled from the UK to the United States and was infected. let me leave it there because I don't want to violate any privacy rights. But Dr. Zucker, do you want to explain?
Yeah, I think, Governor, you covered you covered it exactly. So we do contact tracing, as the governor mentioned, and when you do that, you find out whether there's anybody, where they've been, and through that contact tracing, we identified somebody who had a contact with somebody who had been in the United Kingdom. And so we follow up on this. And as the governor mentioned, the test for, and then we will look for genome sequencing. And a way to look at the genome sequencing issue is it's very much like if you looked at a book and you wanted to read every single letter in the book. So that's why it takes a significant period of time to get the results, because you have to check to be sure one specific letter in a word was not different, and that's how that's a simple way of looking at the testing. But we will look at all of those samples as well. Thank you.
But the other point, Juan, about the virus is mutating every day. How many mutations have there been of the virus?
Dozens of mutations.
Dozens. So there have been dozens of mutations. And who knows if the next mutation is going to be effective with the vaccine? Who knows if the next mutation is going to be more lethal? Who knows if the next mutation is going to do permanent damage? So we know this is mutating. Why don't you test people before they come into the country? I mean, it's also in their best interest. Give them a test. If they're positive, they would want to know that. But you don't need to be inviting the virus in, especially when this is what happened to us in the spring. This is the exact same thing. That's why it's frustrating. Next question, operator.
Governor, you now have Dennis Slattery from New York Daily News. Dennis, your line is now open. Please unmute your microphone.
Good afternoon, Governor. How are you?
How are we doing, Dennis?
Good. Two questions. One, I just want to ask the mayor announced this morning that starting today, NYPD personnel will be eligible to get the vaccine. He's hoping to get at least 10,000 NYPD vaccinated by this Sunday. Can you talk about that and how that works into the state eligibility? And then also, on December 22nd, there was an incident involving a state trooper on the thruway in Ulster that left an 11-year-old girl dead. The family of the little girl is claiming that the trooper involved pepper sprayed the driver before ramming the vehicle off the road. Do you have any comment on that situation?
Okay, two things. One, the only people eligible now are healthcare workers. Now, healthcare workers involve EMS, EMT. So members of the fire department who are EMS or EMT, or members of police department who are EMS or EMT in any police department across the state or fire department across the state, they are all eligible as healthcare workers. Police who are not healthcare workers are not yet eligible. We need to get the healthcare population done first, because they are the front line, and as I mentioned before, nurses and doctors who are in the emergency rooms, in the nursing homes, this is the top priority. We want to make sure they don't get sick. They have the greatest exposure, and we want to make sure they don't get sick because they would also be the super spreaders. And because we would then have diminished hospital capacity, which would mean we would have to close sooner. So police, fire, correction officers, they're essential workers in 1B. But 1B is not yet open. And that's state law. It governs every city in the state. On the state trooper issue, I have heard nothing about that, Mr. Slattery, so I just don't know. I have heard nothing. But I will check with the state police and see if they have a comment. But I heard nothing. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, that was reported over the last several days, and there were conflicting reports initially of what actually happened there. And so I know that the event in question is under review, and obviously our heart goes out to the family who lost someone.
Yeah, I did not see those reports. Next question, operator.
Governor, you now have Jesse McKinley from the New York Times. Jesse, your line is now open. Please unmute your microphone.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Victory. Two quick questions. Considering that there is supply inside the vaccination chain, what is the rationale for not opening it up to 1B so that some patients could at least get vaccinated at this point? And a second question would be on downstate casino licenses. I know that those are technically not supposed to be released until 2023, but has any consideration been given, considering the revenue shortfalls, to opening those up prior to that?
I haven't given it any consideration. And there isn't supply, Jesse. We have received 900,000 dosages for 2.1 million healthcare workers and nursing home workers. And many of those nursing home workers and healthcare workers have not yet been offered the vaccine. So you don't have half enough supply to do the healthcare workers, and the healthcare workers are the top priority. So you don't have supply. If you would have supply, if a hospital says, I offered it to my healthcare workers, and all those who would accept it have been vaccinated or have had a chance to be vaccinated, then you would have supply. In other words, there will be a refusal rate even for healthcare workers. We hope the refusal rate is lower than 20% because we have to be 70 to 90 overall. I've said repeatedly, any hospital that says, I have extra supply because I've offered all my healthcare workers and they won't take it, then call the Department of Health. We'll take that allocation and give it to another hospital or nursing home that needs it. Because overall, we're 900 out of 2.1 million. We're not even halfway there. So any individual hospital that hits saturation and has additional doses left over, great. Then we'll use that because we're not halfway there. Second problem would be a hospital calls up and says, I'm only at 70% acceptance rate. I'm only at 60% acceptance rate. That's going to be a medical problem because that's a very low percentage to operate a hospital. Okay? Let's take one more question, or was that the last question? Thank you. Congratulations, Georgia. Congratulations to the U.S. Senate. Congratulations to the state of New York.